Thanks everyone for joining us. For everyone who can, and for those who can't, we're gonna record it. So I guess first off, we'll have you just explain who you are and like where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you're involved with Sawfish.
Okay. I guess starting off, my name is Adam Brame. I am the National Marine Fisheries Services Species Recovery Coordinator for Smalltooth Sawfish. I've been in that role for 8 years. Growing up in Pennsylvania, I knew I wanted to go into marine biology. So my senior year of high school, I actually moved down to Florida. I graduated from high school in the Orlando area and then did an undergrad degree at University of South Florida in Tampa, followed by a graduate degree also at the University of South Florida, but this time in St. Petersburg. So I've been in the Florida area now since 1997.
That's cool. I didn't know you went to USF or were from Florida. That's neat. And where in Pennsylvania were you from?
I grew up in central Pennsylvania, right outside of Harrisburg, the state capital.
Oh, cool.
And you know, it was fun growing up there. A lot of outdoor activities, a lot of fishing. Growing up, my grandfather's neighborhood, and going to the pond and catching turtles and bass and that sort of thing. But we started coming down for vacation to Florida, probably about sophomore, junior year of high school, and getting that taste of saltwater fishing and being out in the marine environment really drove my decision to move to Florida and pursue marine biology career.
And how did you end up at NOAA, like in your position?
Sure. So following my undergrad degree in Tampa, I jumped right into an internship and a job at the state of Florida, where I was part of their Fisheries Independent Monitoring Program. And as part of that, we were out on the water, 4 or 5 days a week, pulling nets and catching different fish species to just monitor population health of the different species. And I met a colleague there, and he was taking an opportunity at the U.S. Geological Survey and needed someone to help him get that program off the ground. So I left the state. I went to the U.S. Geological Survey. They have a fisheries component or a biological group. And we started a program there where we are sampling wetland fish communities, similar to what we were doing for the Fisheries Independent Monitoring Program at the state. But this was just more in backwater environments, these tidal creeks and ponds. And we spent 5 years doing that. And as part of that opportunity, I met some other colleagues, and one of them ultimately moved on to NOAA. And when he moved to NOAA, he reached out to me and provided an opportunity to go and interview there. So I did my graduate degree as I was working at at the U.S. Geological Survey, and then I was part of what was called a student career employment program that the federal government had, and that transferred from the USGS to NOAA. And so I actually finished my graduate degree when I started working at NOAA.
And did you get your master's, or did you go all the way to your PhD? And
just a master's degree.
Okay. And so then that transitioned to where you are at, and like. Okay.
Yeah. So there at NOAA there was a more entry level position where I was what I consider to be more of a generalist position, doing Section 7 consultation. And in that consultation, that's where federal agencies are coming in because they are wanting to issue a permit, or they're going to fund some research, or they're going to fund a project of some sort. And so anytime that a federal agency funds or issues a permit, they have to undergo Section 7 consultation. And that's a part of the Endangered Species Act that requires them to ensure that their action isn't going to jeopardize the continued existence of any threatened or endangered species. So I did a lot of that for the first couple of years that I was at NOAA before transitioning into species recovery role.
What's your favorite shark?
My favorite shark? Well, I work on oceanic white-tip sharks, and I'm trying to recover them. So at this point in time, I'd have to throw the oceanic white-tip in as my favorite.
And so I guess for some of them who don't know, can you explain like what NOAA is celebrating right now?
Sure. So this marks the 50th year anniversary of the Endangered Species Act. So in 1973, it was the act was amended, and so here we are 50 years later, and we're really trying to buoy up the successes that we've had thus far with the Endangered Species Act. We've received a lot of bad press about the act, and I think a lot of press say, well, the act, the whole purpose of the act is to recover species to the point that they no longer need the protections of the act and thus can be delisted. Why aren't we delisting more species? But if you look at it from the inverse, you could also say the act is keeping species from going extinct, and so we are preventing extinction. Do we have room to grow with more recovery? Absolutely. But, I think that, species can be delisted two different ways. They could be delisted because they've reached recovery and they're, that the population's healthier, or they could be delisted because they've gone extinct. And so we haven't, we haven't done a lot in either direction. So I think that we're holding the ground. And I think that that's a success.
Is that I didn't know that it was getting bad press. Is that recent, just since you guys have started celebrating that it was, or?
No, this has been ongoing for years, and people have different opinions of the act, but I think there's a lot of folks that don't have a full understanding of what it does, and I think that it's easy to say, well, how comes we're not delisting species? Especially in government, and uh, um, you know when politicians are looking at budgets and they're talking about what NOAA Fisheries does and why endangered species matter. Why does it matter that this species persists? Why does it matter if it goes extinct? And I think that we each have to answer that question. But I think that these can have cascade effects. When you lose one species, what does that mean for the ecosystem in which that species habitats?
Calvin, do you have a question?
Yeah. So with the Endangered Species Act, I know that uh pandas in particular, they're being, sent back to China at the end of, I believe, 2024. Are any countries taking similar actions with, let's say, I don't know, sharks or any animals at a SeaWorld?
Yeah, that's a great question, Calvin. No, not that I'm aware of. I don't think that we've heard anything from a marine type species standpoint of any species being recalled to the countries of origin. I can say that sawfish, in particular, we have several foreign species in different aquariums around the country. I think there's some green sawfishes in Atlanta currently, and I haven't heard any talk of them being returned to their home countries.
So going kind of off of what you just talked about and Calvin's question, so how do you think the ESA listing has helped sawfish just in general, or sawfishes in general?
I think that it's multifaceted. I think that sawfish benefited from a number of different conservation measures, and I'm going to start a little bit before their ESA listing. And I think in 1992, the state of Florida prohibited the harvest of sawfish. I think that played a significant role in preventing extinction. In 1995, there was the Florida gillnet ban that also, that particular fishery for mullet overlapped greatly with the mullet fishery, overlapped greatly with the habitats that juvenile sawfish used. And so by banning the use of those gill nets in those particular habitats, I think that was a big conservation success in preventing extinction. And then ultimately, the U.S. population was listed in 2003, and as part of that listing, we also designated critical habitat. We developed a recovery plan. We do 5-year reviews. So, I think that from a Endangered Species Act perspective, it also led to the designation of critical habitat, which is important in preventing the overdevelopment or the continued development of their nursery habitat, which has been a huge importance in preventing extinction. The recovery team and meeting partners that have the capability of doing different things, whether it be education and outreach or monitoring the populations and learning about the biology of the species. You look back at how much we've learned in the last 20 years, and it's amazing. This species was listed with very little knowledge about what the species, the basic biology of the species. Then it's hard to manage a species if you don't know their biology. We didn't know how frequently they gave birth and how many young they had. And so all of these things have been answered over the last 20 years. This year marks the 20th year anniversary of sawfish being on the endangered species list. And I can say that we've made great strides. And I certainly look forward to a lot of new research and science that is ongoing, and a lot of questions that we still have that'll provide more insight. And with each little bit of new knowledge that we gain, we can shift our management priorities to ensure that we're not only conserving the population as it stands now, but getting it to trend in a positive direction, rebuilding the population in hopes that we can delist it one day.
Yeah, I feel like we've definitely gained a lot more knowledge, and I think it helps with resources. I mean, clearly it helps put resources and scientists focusing, on a species if they're listed at least.
Absolutely.
So we do have a question from Nicole Phillips. So she asked, tell the story of the first time you ever saw a sawfish in the wild.
That's a good question, Nicole. Thank you for asking it. My first sawfish encounter was when I was doing sea turtle research, actually, at USGS. We were down in the Everglades. We would live on a houseboat and work off of a skiff that we would tie up to the side of that houseboat at night. And we were out setting what we called tangle nets, a specific type of net that was permitted for use to specifically target sea turtles. And when we set that net, we actually caught a sawfish, and it was a big sawfish. And it was the first one I had ever seen. And this thing was every bit of 13 feet long, and it was not happy, and it was rolled up in the net. And we got scissors out of the box, and we started shredding that net in order to get that sawfish out as quickly as possible. And that was my first experience with a sawfish. We didn't take any measurements, mainly because we were scared to death that we were going to lose a head.
Yeah, how many of you guys, was it like a group of you, or was it just like two of you who that happened to?
I think there was 3 of us on board, maybe 4.
Okay, that's still scary though. Like, I don't even know what I would do.
We definitely didn't have the training to know how to properly handle a sawfish at that given time. We were there to handle sea turtles, and they're a lot more docile than large, angry sawfish.
But it got off okay, right? And it was.
Oh yeah, we got that thing out in a hurry. It swam off, and we actually caught a second one.
Oh my
I don't know if it was a year later or 2 years later, but yeah, down off the coast of the Shark River there. 2 sawfish encounters while working sea turtles.
How funny. And were those just as big, or were those baby ones?
They were both of the ones that we caught over that 2-year period were both big.
Oh my gosh. How interesting. That's so cool. And scary, I guess. And then we have another question from Amazonian coast sawfish. And so they asked, what are the biggest challenges for sawfishes nowadays?
Man, it's a great question. That there's several threats that are ongoing. When we first did the recovery plan and the status review of the species, we looked at all kinds of different threats. But I think that the main threats persisting today are continued habitat loss, where we're losing that nursery habitat due to coastal development, bycatch in fisheries. And when I say bycatch, they're not being targeted per se, but whatever fish that this fishery or a particular fishery is targeting, sawfish are caught incidentally to that target species. And so And when they're caught, it's not necessarily that they're caught, but a lot of times it has to do with the handling and are they safely released and how are they being handled after capture, and that largely dictates whether they survive or not. So the shrimp trawl fishery, in particular, seems to be an ongoing fishery of concern. You know, we're in constant communication with them, trying to identify ways to make that fishery a little safer for sawfish. So those are the big two. I think marine debris is probably a distant third at this point. You know, we see some entanglement issues, ball bungee cords that help hold on boathouse canopies. Seems to be an emerging issue in the Charlotte Harbor area. So that's something we're going to keep an eye on. Those bungees tend to make their way down the sawfish saw and get around its face and start cutting into the body a little bit.
Yeah, I think someone just posted today a sawfish that, like, I don't know if it was from a while ago, but it looked like it was wrapped up in fishing line and it had cut into the saw really bad. And then it looked like also like a crab trap or something as well.
Yeah, I know that there's a really good picture from Biscayne National Park in which a sawfish, you know, like probably, you know, a 10-footer was pulling a whole bunch of pot line for a while. And I think the park rangers were able to cut that free at some point or another. But we run into that periodically. So yeah, you know, anytime that there's stuff in the water, there's a probability that that nice toothy rostrum can get entangled in it.
And you were mentioning the shrimp trawlers. Is that the ones here in the US, like along the Gulf Coast that you guys work with?
The ones that we're most closely working with is the U.S. fleet, but I think that it's a worldwide problem probably. Just the overlap of shrimp trawling in areas where sawfish habitate is you know, increases the probability of interaction. And I think that that's largely what it is just, you know, there's overlap between habitat use and shrimp effort.
I guess this goes into our last question, or at least my last question is, how can people celebrate International Sawfish Day and help sawfish in their everyday life? And I know I've told people when I've done outreach, like eating less shrimp might help with that then, if the shrimp trawlers are a big problem. But what is your opinion? Like, what do you tell people?
I always say that the biggest thing is raising awareness. This is an endangered species and many people don't know what it is. Many people have no idea what a sawfish is. You often hear people say, it's a saw shark or it's a sawtooth, you know, and those are all things that are misidentifications, but largely it's a unique species. It's endangered, so there's not many of them, so people don't get to see them. And as such, it's hard to generate that empathy for a species you don't get to see. And so really it's raising awareness. And my challenge to everyone listening here and in every presentation that I do, I've been here at SeaWorld all day giving some presentations, is I'm challenging everyone in attendance to be a conservation partner and to go out and tell your friends and family about what a sawfish is and where you can find them and what you can do to report one if you see one in the wild, or if you see a saw hanging in a bar or a restaurant, you know, letting, you know, the folks at Sawfish Conservation Society know so that they can go out and get a genetic sample and all of these things. You know, it's really a word of mouth opportunity to spread the knowledge that you have, even if it's limited to your friends and family. And if they do the same thing, then, you know, it's the old phone tree and it can grow pretty quickly. So I challenge everyone to be conservation partners.
Yeah, I think that's another great one, is raising awareness. So that's a great idea. And Desiree has a question. She says, Adam, how did you become the sawfish recovery coordinator for NOAA?
I touched on this a little bit earlier. I was already working at the agency in a different role. Shelley Norton was our previous sawfish recovery coordinator, and she was leaving the role to take a different position within the agency. And so they had an opportunity to do a detail in that position. So I was fortunate enough to be able to go in and give it a 6-month test drive or a 4-month test drive. I can't remember how long it was. And I got to meet the recovery team partners and, get a taste of what this recovery program looked like. And it was exciting. And going back to those days of catching those big ones down in the Everglades by accident, it was definitely a unique species that I was interested in knowing more about. And so ultimately that position posted, and it was a competitive application process. And I was fortunate enough to succeed in getting that role.
Awesome. And we have another question from Tanya Wiley. And she says, ask Adam if he thinks smalltooth sawfish will recover.
Hi, Tanya. Yes, I personally do think they will recover. I think that what the recovery team has done over the last 20 years is amazing. We've made such strides in our understanding of the species. I think that, we have some positive data, or some data that shows some positive trend direction where it's trending upward, particularly in the juvenile population. I think we still have some strides to make in ensuring that the adults are surviving and reproducing. But at this point in time, I think that, we like to say we're cautiously optimistic, but I do foresee, recovery, but I think it's going to take a couple more decades, just given how slowly they reproduce.
And she has two other questions. She says, how can people in the U.S. report their encounters, and why should they do this?
Yeah, we have a hotline number. It's 1-844-4-SAWFISH. That number, it goes to our U.S. Sawfish Recovery Team. It's a group of interdisciplinary partners that work together in the role of recovering sawfish. And we have state partners, federal partners, university partners, nonprofit, non-government, National Park Service. So a number of different players that all work together. Those calls, those reports, if you see one while you're out kayaking or while you're out fishing, all go to that group of scientists and partnerships. And they use that information then to steer their research, but also to monitor their population. As people, because we've been doing this for 20 years, even though public data reports can be skewed a little bit, and we have to take that with a grain of salt, but we've been doing it for so long that it provides another mechanism to monitor the population beyond going out and catching them in nets. And so it's another metric that we use for looking at recovery success.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that's, I think, all the questions I have. Does anyone else have any questions they want to ask Adam before we let him enjoy the aquarium?
Before I have my 2.5-hour drive back to St. Petersburg in I-4 traffic.
It looks like, okay, so another one. How do we limit fishing gear, impose restrictions without impacting how much food we can provide for the whole community? How does this apply in the context of third world countries?
Man, that's a tough question. And
Good question.
I don't think it's an easy answer, and I don't think it's a one size fits all. In developing countries where food is scarce, I think it's really hard. And I think that, we come off looking like hypocrites when we tell developing nations that they can't harvest fish because they're endangered. In many cases, these people are just surviving, and they need whatever resources they can get. And so it's difficult, but I think that ultimately you need to bring in people from different communities, from all different economic brackets, to be partners. You have to bring them in and express the importance of these animals to the ecosystem, give them alternatives, work with them, don't admonish them. And, it's going to take time. It's not something that we're going to solve overnight. As far as fisheries back home here in the United States, I think it's really preaching safe handling and release guidance, making sure that when bycatch occurs, that they're safely handled and released safely and quickly such that they can survive.
But I think that's a great one to end on. And thank you so much, Adam, for, allowing us to ask you questions and sharing your time with us. Oh, wait, may have one more. Oh, Tanya has one more. Tanya's
All
last.
right, last one, Tanya, then they're booting me out of here.
Okay, so what should someone do if they catch one? How do they handle safely for both the fisher and the sawfish?
Another good question, and this goes back to safe handling and release guidance that the recovery team has generated over years of experience and modifying it, tweaking it here and there to get the best results. But if someone catches one on hook and line, we ask that you always keep it in the water and cut the line as close to the hook as possible. Don't try to board it onto your boat. It provides an opportunity for the animal to be injured, but also for yourself to be injured. That rostrum can swing side to side very quickly and can be very dangerous, leading to some deep cuts. So leave it in the water, cut the lines close to the hook as possible, and then we always ask that you report it to the hotline number 1-844 for sawfish. And like I said, that information is used by the researchers to monitor the population and direct their research.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your time at SeaWorld and your drive back as well. Hopefully it's not too bad. But
all right. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and happy International Sawfish Day, folks.
yes, happy International Sawfish Day.
Bye, all.
Bye.